Open Summit, and we're just so fortunate to have Travis with us, having both, knowing both sides of this discussion, not just, being somebody who's involved in technology as an esports gamer, but also somebody who's been very proactive about their vision. Travis, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Doing good, Charlene. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about your background and, how'd you get into esports and your journey?
Yeah, so when I first started out gaming, as a little kid, my parents wouldn't allow me to have a video game console, and so they were afraid that I would just be playing video games all day. And so I ended up, but I had to have a regular computer just for schoolwork, and so I ended up turning that schoolwork computer into my gaming computer. And so that's what really kicked off my love for gaming. And I grew up playing the original Call of Duty, the original Battlefield 1942, the original Medal of Honor, games like Red Alert, Master Commander, Conquer Generals. Those were the games I grew up on playing. So that's what really kicked off my love for gaming and the FPS genre. And that's what started to kick it off. It was, and then when I was at USC, that's when I bought my very first console, the Xbox 360. And I started playing a lot of Call of Duty. I realized I was talented and good at it. And then I started entering into competitions and also league play for Call of Duty Black Ops 2. I placed second in Masters Division for Black Ops 2. After Black Ops 2, I believe it was Ghost after that, and the whole Call of Duty franchise kind of went south for me. And so I switched over to Battlefield and became a top-ranked gamer in Battlefield 4 for sniping and with the CLSLR 4. And I poured crazy amount of hours into that game, about 2,000 or 3,000 hours, and eventually worked to become ranked to the number 6 in the world. And I thought that was it. I couldn't, get higher or attain anything after that. But I was introduced to a company in Santa Monica, and they trained me and on the NeuroTracker device. And with that, they actually helped bring me up to number 1 in the world. And that was Neurovision Consulting. Worked with them extensively, and I was totally skeptical of vision training. I didn't think it was really going to help me. I totally had this trick of somewhere like, oh, I'm already number 6. How are you going to bring me to number 1? But sure enough, just after a couple weeks of intense neurostimulation training on the NeuroTracker, they brought me up to number 1 in the world. And it was amazing just to see the transformation. I noticed that just it just felt like the game was slowing down. And it really wasn't the game slowing down. It was just my processing speed was increasing. I was capturing in information at a much more rapid pace than before. And the results were just incredible. And in game, I would see someone before they could even raise their gun. I would already shoot, kill, dead, move on to the next player. And so, the results were incredible. I became a total convert of vision training ever since. I was ranked in that company alone. They work with some of the most elite athletes in the world, from Formula One drivers to rugby players, soccer players, NFL players. They even work with special forces and SWAT teams. And out of all the people, and professional baseball players, boxers, and out of everyone that they train and work with, their top competitors were the F1 drivers, which isn't a surprise because you think of reaction time, you have to be so quick. And so, but I was actually in the top 3 of the company alongside Lance Stroll and Romain Grosjean in F1. And so, all the data that was pouring in, they would see just my results of doing all the vision training, both in the actual NeuroTracker and in the actual game. Because back then we actually had play-by-play statistics for each match I was doing. And the actual trainer I worked with, named Ash, we actually saw my results in the actual vision training have a direct parallel correspondence with the actual game itself. So my headshot accuracy percentage, my kill death ratio, my score percentage, all the actual in-game stats correlated directly to an increase with the actual increase in my training. So it was actually remarkable. You could turn this, and they were actually turning to a study, and it's actually remarkable the results that we got. And then what ended up happening was all that data was pouring back into Geneva, Switzerland, where their headquarters were. I ended up getting flown out there and meeting an owner of several different teams, and he asked me if I wanted to start an esports team, and I said yes. And that's how I ended up moving out to Geneva and being part of a small little team out there. But we had access to some of the most elite high performance coaches in the world, people from the English Premier League, people from Formula One, and then also working with Roger Federer's performance coach. So And every hour, every minute of our day was mapped out for us. And a good portion of that was actually vision training. So we were working on not just NeuroTracker, but also Synaptic and a bunch of other training tools and devices as well. And then I actually, at a later point, I got introduced to Charles, and Charles introduced me to the rest of his toys. And so, I played with, Binary Touch, Right Eye, Fit Like, Cognitive View, you name it, I've used it. So Fit Like everything. So, yeah.
So now, how long ago was it that you started with the NeuroTracker? What year was that?
This would have been about 2016. So
Wow, unbelievable. So this
26. Like 29.
technology.
Yeah, it was about 26. Yeah, so it was about 2016. I started working with them.
Yeah, and it's interesting. In our industry, when we started talking about this event, we were trying to find ways to really get people interested in understanding all of the needs of like this. There's so many new people out there who really need eye doctors and opticians to understand their lifestyles. I mean, it's more than just a standard eye exam that they need. And meeting you and hearing you talk about this, I mean, these 7 years of just intense knowledge of this, it's just so unbelievable. I had no idea that you had been so impacted by really focusing on your performance. And it's funny that you were a skeptic. Why do you think you were so skeptical before you took this journey?
Because I've never heard of it before, and I was like, how is this really going to benefit me? Me just tracking, doing multiple object tracking, contrast sensitivity, visual acuity. It's like, how are any of these skills go, no go? How are any of these skills going to be attributable and applicable to in game? And that's where I was very wrong, and glad I was very wrong. So and to find out that it was going to be applicable and very beneficial for my gameplay. So yeah, absolutely remarkable. And that just set me on the path to vision training and how it impacts esports athletes. And I ended up, while you're building kind of like the esports training protocol on the Synaptic Sensory Station. So I actually visited esports teams in London, Paris, Amsterdam, Geneva, and to actually incorporate their training with vision training on the Synaptic. So, which is another device I use for my training.
What a fun adventure, huh? You really get to just live life to the fullest.
Yeah, and now I'm working with I'm currently working with a company right now called Percept, and we are working on some very advanced digital optical eyewear for gaming. So it all it all correlates.
Now, tell me, just because I know you stay very involved in this subject, in general, how many esports players, or just gamers that are aware of the impact of, vision training or just being, proactive about their vision and how it could impact their gameplay?
I think it's still relatively unknown. Like it's untapped waters, really. When I did this back in 2016, I was the very first gamer to really undergo this intensive amount of training. I think even to this day, even if you go to the biggest teams and orgs and whatnot, they still, if you even mention vision training or and actually employing that, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. Or if you do say vision training, they'll be like, oh, let's get a ball string and start a typical optometrist device or something like that. They don't think of like the advanced all the advanced training protocol and technology that they can use to actually make their gamers better. So I think there are a few teams that are kind of taking steps in the right direction, but none of them are actually doing all the different types of vision training that could really take their esports athletes to the next level.
Well, it's just really a great opportunity to have a unique competitive advantage and to actually encourage good behavior. Because let's face it, I mean, you are putting a strain on your visual system as well. So learning how to use it appropriately probably could prolong your years of being able to play. So you mentioned Dr. Shidlovsky, and he introduced us, and I'm so glad he did. He's been a great champion of performance vision. He's kind of like known as the founding, the first one to really bring the pioneer of bringing this concept to our industry. And he and I have talked a little bit about ergonomics and understanding how esports players sit and their posture and frames and lens selection. What have you kind of learned about those little details? And we were talking a little about 3D eyewear before. Talk to me a little bit about like just wearing eyeglasses, what you've learned being an esports player.
Like the type of eyewear I use, or like the posture, or all of it, or Oh, by the way, your audio cut out.
Yeah, this is a brand new subject. So, there's, I speak with a lot of opticians. Some of them are gamers, so they do have these conversations. But I think in general, this is like a new group of information that eye care professionals can gather. So anything that you can share would be helpful.
Yeah. So when it comes to eyewear, yeah, I use blue blockers to prevent the blue light, but and there's some exciting stuff I'm working on with Percept on that front to help gamers' eyes not get as much strained and also have more productive gaming sessions as well and practices and scrimmages. And then yeah, so that's just on the eyewear front. I noticed that if I do wear contacts, just after about an hour or so, my eyes are burning in front of my monitor, and I can't play anymore. So that it's not productive. So yeah, eyewear's huge for protecting your eyes, especially having the blue blockers on. And yeah, and also it's interesting to we're speculating at this point, but I'm interested to see kind of like what sort of sleep cycles we could get gamers back on a normal sleep routine instead of these long crazy hours of just wakeless nights, because a lot of these gamers aren't using blue blockers, or they don't have glasses. So all this emitting of the blue light is just keeping them up, which to them they think it's a good thing. But you need your sleep, and you need to get on a good sleep cycle. And so by having a good pair of blue blockers, this does allow a natural sleep, circadian rhythm to fall into place. So and that's the thing. It's like a lot of these gamers they may focus on one area good at, which whether it be, it's like, oh, they train a lot, and they train practice, but it's like, you have to be well balanced. You can train all you want, on the computer, but it's like, if you're not eating right, if you're not sleeping right, if you're not training your, physical body correctly, whatnot, it's like, all these are pieces to the puzzle. And if some of those pieces are missing, you're not playing with a full deck. And if you are playing
Just
with a
like
full
any
deck,
athlete, right? Like just
correct.
like
Yeah.
any athlete, you've got to consider yourself an athlete, and you've got to take good care of your whole body. That's such a great point.
Yeah. And to what you're saying about longevity, that's a huge key thing for me. So back in the day, it used to be, oh, esport athletes, they burn out at age 21, 22, and then they're done and it's over, whatnot. But now we're seeing gamers get older and the sport get older. So now we're seeing gamers in their now they're late 20s, early 30s playing. I would love to see gamers play well into their 30s, even possibly early 40s. And I know it's possible too if they fully commit to a complete holistic, high performance training regimen. If they do that, they'll be able to keep their brain sharp, especially through a lot of vision training. One thing, some of the things that I've learned through training with my trainer over at Neurovision Consulting is that when you do vision training, you're actually going through a process called neurogenesis. And so you're actually creating new neurons. And so your brain's actually in many ways expanding. And this actually prevents Alzheimer's. It also prevents aging of the brain. And it fights this off. So it's like, if you're keeping your brain super sharp like that, that's just one piece. But again, it's nutrition. It's a whole holistic 360-degree approach to performance. And no esport athletes doing that currently right now. So, or if they are, it's very few and far between that are really going to like the elite level of, somebody's like a Formula One driver who has a team built around him, or Olympic athlete. So esports hasn't caught up yet, but I hope it does.
Yeah, and it's like, I speak to a lot of people about neurovision and like this kind of connection between the eyes and the brain. And it's only something I've been learning about recently. I'm not an optometrist, but I'm privileged to be around, brilliant doctors like Dr. Shalosky, like Dr. Lamott, and getting involved in the metaverse, which is kind of what spawned this whole fascination between vision and technology. The closer I get to this metaverse and this gaming industry and this esports industry, I'm just amazed at the opportunities that are there. Talk to me a little, and I know we didn't talk a lot about VR, and that isn't a subject matter that you've proclaimed to be an expert in, but it's kind of hard to be in this industry and not be aware of, games that are accessed through VR. So do you have any idea at all about any research and development that's been done on VR and, how it impacts a vision or anything like that? Because I'm out on a quest to find anyone who's got knowledge on this subject. And it's fascinating how few people really have, studied this to any great degree.
Yeah, I love VR, by the way. So I love experiencing something called the Void in Los Angeles. It actually a VR experience that actually plays very akin to a video game design, where there's checkpoints, there's passages you go through, and different sequences of events that you pass through, and it's a really really fun experience. I love VR. On the actual vision training side of things, though, from what I've heard speaking to the people over at Synaptic, is that it's difficult to do vision training on virtual reality because it's actually hard to perceive proper depth perception, and that you actually can't correctly do depth perception in virtual reality, from what I've heard. So, so vision training with VR, I haven't. I just heard that it's going to be difficult to do. But I love VR, and I love VR gaming. It's really fun, and I think, I think that's a lot of that's going to be keep going that direction as the VR headsets become more affordable and they get more advanced, and more games are being built for that platform.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I recently went to American Dream, which is a mall over in New Jersey, and like almost all of the attractions there, they had an aquarium in VR. It was absolutely breathtaking that to see like a whole amusement park basically with all VR. So you're absolutely right. This is definitely where the world is going. So, obviously we're speaking to a really big diverse audience with this event. We're getting attraction from both sides. We call them the peers and the public, like people from within the industry and just the general public. If you were to, share a message with optometrists or to gamers that you feel could learn from your journey, what would you tell them?
Yes, invest in vision training. I'm a total convert from it. I was skeptical, and then I found the light, and I never looked back. And I saw firsthand the results of me actually going and undergoing this extensive neurostimulation training. And I highly invest you to do the same. Especially, I mean, you think about all the athletes in the world. Esport athletes are, I mean, it's a mental visual sport. Whereas the rest, it's all, other traditional athletes, it's more physical than it is mental. Whereas esport athletes, it's such a mental, visual, cognitive sport. That's vision training should be at the forefront of esports, and that's where I feel like the holy grail is for actually optimizing gaming performance. And so if you're an optometrist wanting to train gamers or whatnot, then start learning all the different vision training technologies and devices out there, and educate yourself on, and then build out protocols for gamers to see, and track their progress along the way. And then also, educate gamers on this training and how it works, and to take them to the next level. And if you're gamers, start looking into all these different vision training technologies, see what you can afford now, or go to your local optometrist to see what knowledge they have on this. So.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a privilege to have somebody with your knowledge. We're very fortunate that we're starting to get the message out. The optical metaverse is something that I was really shocked to see how much of the Web3 and the gaming and the metaverse world was really excited to get access to the optical industry through this kind of portal that we've opened up. And, I'm sure a lot of people in the industry haven't heard of you, but I think they'd be fascinated to follow you now. So when you speak with I'm sure you have a lot of friends in this industry of esports and just in general, has anybody ever come to you and say, hey, like, how do I get that sort of service? Like, where do I go?
Yeah, so some of them, I mean, I feel like a lot of esport athletes, they could be somewhat stubborn. Like, they have their own method, and they just want to keep grinding out 8, 10, 12 hours a day, every day, with their gaming, and for practice to get ready for a tournament, and then they go. So I think a lot of them are still kind of stuck in this mentality that they're just going to keep grind, and that's the only way they get better. But I saw firsthand the results I got, and I hope others, follow the same. And for those that do want to get access, that's going to be hard. So you'd have to find a location that actually has like a neurovision, a NeuroTracker like setup. NeuroTracker does have something where you can actually buy the actual NeuroTracker on your laptop and go through training that. I love NeuroTracker. It was my first love in the vision training world, but the actual laptop version is not, I think, beneficial for esport athletes as much as the big projector with the big screen, which is actually stretching and pushing your peripherals and your eyes way more than just a tiny laptop screen. So finding a place to do that. Also, there is actually, and then finding also an optometry center or an actual sports science or like a gym location that actually has a synaptic sensory station, or that has reflection to train on would be great. And then too, on a personal note, you could then see about buying or asking your parents, or if you can buy yourself, the synaptic strobes, which are a fantastic way to actually train. I'll actually turn up the brightness on my monitor as high as possible, then actually play with the synaptic strobes and actually lower the hertz frequency to lower. So I'm actually seeing fewer and fewer frames, and by doing that, the brain is trying to piece together the moving image, and then when you take it off, everything feels heightened, and that you're able to process information more rapidly. A good example of this is a lot of the wide receivers in the NFL actually use the synaptic strobes for training catching a ball, or basketball players will practice their free throws or their 3-pointers. So they'll actually wear the strobes and then adjust the hertz frequency level to see what they want to see, but it's in between sessions of black. So so that's on a personal note, and then figure out what other training devices out there and what you can afford, and then find locations that have these devices already that you can train at. So that's what I would say.
So now, and I'm totally becoming educated on this subject. I mean, I've scoured the industry just finding eye doctors that even talk about this, and Charles is one of the real few. Is this equipment the only way? Is there maybe an entry level way for optometrists, and maybe let's say somebody's an amateur esports player, not playing at the level that you were at? Are there basic exercises or things that you think people can be mindful of that'll help them to determine, what they need to be able to benefit from performance vision training?
Yeah, there is other stuff at a smaller level. For example, when we were undergoing our training, we had to do catching playing cards. And so you have one person they look like a ninja dart, but a card at you, and you having to catch the cards. And eventually you put one hand behind back, and then the other time you blindfold one eye, which totally eliminates your depth perception, making it even more difficult to catch these cards. That's just one example. There's cupping the eyes. There's also there's elaborate mazes you can go through. There's the Peak Brain Training app that you can go through, which tests your brain with different puzzles and vision skills. So there's stuff on the small level you could do, but you ideally want to incorporate that with the bigger stuff down the road.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, but that's kind of interesting. I wonder how, you always wonder, how do people come up with this stuff? It's pretty fascinating. Well, I know that you mentioned you've retired from your really successful career as an esports athlete. What's on the roadmap for you now? What are you up to these days?
So as I said, I'm currently working with a company called Percept, and I'm responsible for building out the esports entertainment division, and I'm working with them on some very cool, advanced, futuristic digital optical eyewear for video games. So the future is looking very, very bright for gaming with eyewear in the future. So can't go into any detail of the actual property that we're building out, but I'm very excited. So it all correlates. So it's still eyewear, eyes, vision, and how that plays a part in gameplay.
Yeah, and that's just, I think they're very fortunate, whoever that company is, to have someone with your experience, because, this is just a completely untapped market. You probably know this number. I'm not going to take a stab at this statistic. How many esports players do they proclaim are, active right now? It's a pretty staggering number, right?
Well, not saying esports. Esports represents, the top 1% of competitors and whatnot. If you just look at gamers around the world, I believe there's 2 billion gamers, and that includes not just PC console, but also mobile. So even people on their phone, just playing games on their phone as well. So the gamers are everywhere. And it's the highest form of entertainment because it turns passive viewers into active participants. And it's my favorite entertainment as well. And this is coming from someone who loves film and TV as well. But it's the fact that you get in film, TV, the protagonist controls you, but in video games, you control the protagonist. So, yeah.
Well, just one last thing I have to find out from you. And I know there's almost a tug of war between gamers and metaverse Web3 type of experiences. But when you really look at them, some metaverses are built on Unreal Engine 5, which is the same, technology that a lot of these games are built on. And I'm sure gameplay is the same. I mean, whether you call it a metaverse or a game, you're still looking at the screen, you're still responding, you're still moving your character around. I mean, won't we all become gamers soon?
Yeah, it's so funny because I hear people talk about metaverse as being, it's like, oh, this virtual like world where it's social hub and people can interact. It's like every game is its own metaverse, especially like if you look at a game like Destiny, for example, when you're inside the tower and you're interacting with your fellow players, there's an actual economy going on there of trading and actually exchanging guns and there's currency and whatnot. It's like every game has its own metaverse going on. I think it's, people went crazy though once I think Facebook changed its name to Meta, and now they're talking about building a metaverse. So it's like there's many metaverses that already exist online. So whether it be a Skyrim mod or whatnot, so it's any big kind of like open, any big MMO game that actually has all these different gamers with an economy built into it, and there's a social compatibility. Is its own metaverse to that extent. So you're correct with the different game engines that abound. It's like, yeah, the game creators are building the metaverses. So.
Well, and we'll come full circle to this performance discussion, because now you're going to be talking about executives and, people that are having to, compete at their job in, digital platforms like this, the same way they do in the real world, and learning how to take breaks and how to, make sure that they're getting, one of the big subjects of the event is binocular vision, and making sure that people have headaches. They understand that sometimes it's an indicator that you've got something else going on. So I am sure that we can go on and on. I am like super fascinated about everything you've shared about. We definitely would love to have you back again. I'll give you the last word, Travis.
Yeah, thank you, Charlene, for inviting me for the interview today. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And for all the optometrists watching and gamers alike, please invest your time, energy, and resources into sports vision training. It will change your performance for the gamers out there, and for the optometrists who train them. You're going to be impacting lives and actually helping people reach their peak pinnacle level. So, and what's more rewarding than that than helping your client get to their top peak self?
I couldn't have said it better. I'm so glad I had you here to articulate that point. And I think, it's just a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to really connect with this whole huge community. So I'm really glad that you were here to speak on behalf of gamers and esports players. And thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Charlene, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you guys at the event.
Cheers.